You're live.
We're live.
Dude, your story is one of my favorite stories. I tell it to everybody. Because what your story represents is the fact that it doesn't matter what you want to accomplish. It doesn't matter who you are. You know, through hard work, you can get results. Like when you're not managing the beer and wine section of Wegmans, you're playing video games.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you're playing World of Warcraft. You're playing Call of Duty. You don't really even have an athletic background, you told me. You know, you told me in high school, you went out for the track team, you got some shin splints, you were like, this really isn't for me.
Yeah, accurate.
And 2 years ago, you wanted to do something active, so you joined Paper Street MMA, which is, you started doing jiu-jitsu. You're a blue belt there, that's where we met. I earned my blue belt there. And this summer, you were like, I want to do something competitively for the first time in my life to challenge myself. And instead of starting with like something leisurely, like a 5K walk or run, you're like, I think I'm going to try what most would consider the hardest sport in the world, an amateur MMA fight in a cage. And so June 23rd rolls around. I show up to this thing. It's like a nice venue. There's beer, announcers, like a lot of people. This isn't in someone's basement.
Yeah.
And, you know, all of a sudden you hear 145-pound Clint Barger to the octagon. And that bell rings, and now it's on. It's real. And you're getting punched in the face hard. But not because you weren't prepared, not because Paper Street didn't do a great job with you, or you didn't work hard. Just because, like, that real thing, man, it's different. So 50 seconds goes by, but you collect yourself beautifully. Mm-hmm. You're up against the cage. You get a great takedown. You throw up an awesome triangle that's taught to you by Jay Frawley and Maida and all the amazing higher belts at Paper Street, and all the great technique that they taught you. It wraps around his neck. You choke him out. He taps out, and you win. And that's not even the best part. The best part is, after you win, you get your arm raised by infamous Dan Mergliotta, who's a really famous referee in the MMA world. You take a picture, you post it on your Facebook wall, and say something along the lines like, I hope this is an inspiration to, you know, other amateur fighters out there. I'm a video gamer who worked hard doing a training camp, and I just won an amateur fight. And Reddit sees this. They share it to their Facebook wall where it gets 10,000 likes, and video gamers from all over are commenting like, dude, thanks for being such an inspiration and a role model to us. And amateur fighters are like, dude, thanks for motivating me. I'm definitely going to get out there and do my first fight. Like, can you believe that you did something like this?
It was kind of surprising, to say the least. Yeah, I mean, you know, you said it real good. Like, I really came from, like, zero athletic background. My roommate in college was, like, this bodybuilder dude from New Jersey, and he got me into lifting. And that was kind of the start of it that ended up eventually like leading me down this path where I was like, I developed the competitive spirit to like get into MMA. But yeah, it was wild. The Reddit thing, everything else. I mean, the amount of attention that I received, I did not expect to, you know, but for somebody who like has a full-time job, never played any sports in high school or college, you know, only trained for like 3 years. And some people think you've had to have done something like this your entire life to like get out there and do it. I was just happy that I got out there.
And that's the thing about like doing something inspirational or doing something that impacts other people. Because like when I see someone doing something inspirational, inevitably I go and do something, you know, inspirational myself. And then that motivates someone else or impacts someone else. And it's definitely like a domino effect, you know? And doing something like that is just, you know, out of your element and out of your comfort zone. Like, it definitely, like, defines you as a person, and it changes your overall outlook. And, like, so when you're in the cage and before this thing is starting, like, that bell rings, are you nervous at all? Like,
so this is not what most amateur fighters, I think, would how they would respond to this question, but I was not nervous at all. And that was a problem. Like, my number one thing as soon as I got out was like, I was not mean enough at all.
You couldn't get mad.
No, not at all. I went in there like treating it like it was a sparring session. I was so relaxed. I was like so calm. And even like, you know, Dan brings us out and we touch gloves, center the cage and everything. And then I got hit in the face the first time. And I'm like, oh, yep, this is real.
Right.
Like that hurt a lot, you know. And then just like that, it's just super fast.
Why do you think that was? Just because you were out there just trying to challenge yourself and push yourself rather than acting like it was some professional, HBO special fight?
Right. And I think that was kind of the mindset that I had going into it, you know, was that like, I'm not a professional. You know, this is an amateur MMA. Right. You can't kick to the head. You can't punch the head on the ground. Pennsylvania has all these really restrictive rules. So it's kind of like, you know, MMA like junior. Right. You know, basically. It's a lot different. So I didn't feel like I had to be nervous. Right. You know, I was just happy that I was there.
I see that being a limiting factor for a lot of people. When thinking, like, I see it all the time with, like, my 5Ks and charity events where people don't come out to do the 5K because they're worried about, like, getting professional records or not getting a good time or what other people think of how they're going to run or how they're going to move, you know. And if that is something that holds you back, man, who cares? Because, like I said, like, you got to be out there challenging yourself. At the end of the day, it is you versus you. No one cares what you look like. No one cares what time you get. Get out there, challenge yourself, push yourself, because at the end of the day, that's, you know, the only thing that matters. As soon as the fight was over, like, I asked you, if you lost, would that have been failure, though, like, if you lost?
No, and I think that's another thing that, you know, my coaches, especially Jay, was trying to drill into me, and it helped my confidence so much, you know, that, like, even people that are going to take it to the professional level, you know, losing is not failure.
Right.
50% of the people that participate in MMA are going to lose. Right. 2 of you walk into the cage, 1 of you is going to end up losing. For me, failure would have been if I didn't do it. Yeah. If I got injured during fight camp, if I, you know, got put in a bad position in the first round and quit, you know, if I decided to not come out for the second round, if any of that would have happened, like, that's what I would have considered failure, you know? And I think that was part of what made it so important to me to actually get out there and do this, because I've always been somebody in my life who, like, over plans and over prepares.
That's a big one.
For basically everything.
Yes.
Okay? When I'm playing video games, I'm the guy, and you can ask my girlfriend this, and she makes fun of me for it all the time. I sit there and I'm like, okay, I spend like 4 or 5 hours and I'm like reading forums and I got like spreadsheets open and I'm planning out all my stats and leveling and everything. And like, I haven't even installed the game yet.
And all this time has gone by and you haven't even played.
Yeah, I haven't even touched anything.
And I hear that all the time. One of the biggest things that I hear is like, I'm going to get in shape first before I join your gym, Derek. And it's like, who's in shape? What does that mean? Because everybody is in their own shape. And then once you're in a certain, you know, you've hit a certain standard, well, in a month, you shouldn't be in that same state of shape anyway. So it should always be changing. It always should be evolutionizing. And also, you know, if you go to the proper place for training, a professional trainer, you know, everybody should get their own training protocol. So, you know, the fact that you think that you're going to go and do some walking or something along those lines that's going to get you better at maybe doing a squat exercise or a push-up exercise, when we go and do those things, you're not. Advanced people, advanced clients get advanced protocols. Protocols are very important. You know, rookies or true beginners to fitness should get rookie stuff, like doing a push-up against the wall or squatting to a chair. Mm-hmm. You know, everybody is different. Protocols are different. But what you do and how you do it depends on, you know, where you're starting and where you want to get to. But to not start something because you're not in shape to do something, like you go to a gym to get, or a professional trainer to get into shape, not because you're not in shape. Do you think this whole thing was a good idea?
Yeah. I mean, so I'm at work. It was like a Saturday night. And my phone rings, and it's my boxing coach, Benny, on the phone. And, like, Benny is, like, super short, this, like, old Irish dude. I think he smokes, like, 400 cigarettes a day and drinks, like, 17 pots of coffee. And, you know, he's like, an overall, like, small guy, and he can beat the crap out of almost anybody that I know. Yeah, like, unquestionably. And he's like, hey, Clint. And I'm like, what's up, Benny? In the back room in my, like, little office in Wegmans. And he's like, do you want to, take an MMA fight, June 23rd. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool. I immediately go back to my boss's office, get the time off and everything. And the camp was the hardest thing that I've ever done in my entire life. It was 8 weeks. It was the hardest thing that I've ever done. But now, the confidence that I have coming out of that, obviously during the camp, it was incredibly stressful. We're going to talk more about that, obviously, but it's coming out of it, the confidence that I had, I look back and I'm just like, okay, is whatever I'm about to do harder than getting punched in the face and thrown on the ground for 3 hours a day for 8 weeks?
Right. Yeah, dude, after you were done that fight, we were just popping out mud runs. Like,
you asked me, you're like, yo, do you want to do a triathlon? And I'm like, yeah, sure. And like 2 weeks later, I'm like out there, end up doing a duathlon because I'm terrified of water, I guess. Because swimming is the hardest thing. You said MMA might be the hardest sport. I think swimming might actually be.
Swimming's brutal,
yeah,
man.
the hardest sport.
I trained all summer long and I still look like a dying fish.
Yeah, it was bad.
I would think like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in general has played a large impact in your life and the past 2 years.
Yeah, I started. So for me, the big thing is like for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is how mentally engaging it is.
Right.
On top of being a great physical workout.
Right.
So like when I started, like I said, my like gym bro bodybuilder roommate gets me into lifting, and I got out of college, went on and just I was getting bored. I was getting really, really bored with just lifting, myself. So the big thing was for me it was something that was engaging and something for me to do with people too. Right. And that was really what kept me in it. I constantly felt like I was learning something. I constantly felt like I was developing every single class that I went back to. You can stall on weights for weeks at a time and not really see any progress. But if you go to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, 4 or 5 days a week for weeks at a time, you're going to learn something new at the end of those
weeks.
I
think the two are, very similar in the sense of, yes, if you're stalling on weights the same way if you are with Jiu-Jitsu, it's about figuring out where you can get a little bit better and where your weaknesses are. And if you're willing to put in the work to do the small things to improve each week and be, comfortable with being a little bit discombobulated for a second, feeling weird, feeling, out of sorts. And being able to stop, listen, see it better, and then apply a little bit better, and then get better at it.
To maintain yourself under pressure.
For sure. And you absolutely can apply that to life. And one of my favorite things about my whole Jiu-Jitsu experience so far and the awesomeness at Paper Street is just all the amazing training partners that you have there. And obviously, I'm very big with training partners. Yeah. We talk about that in the world of fitness, obviously. If you have someone who's negative or doesn't show up, or even if you show up to a gym, I hear this all the time, like, I like the gym, I just don't like the people at the gym. Well, you can change that via action. You can be the positive reinforcement. You can be the one that pushes hard. You can be the the one through your actions that is setting the standard. But also having, one of the biggest things that I learned and noticed from everybody at Paper Street is like when I couldn't do something, right? People were literally willing to allow me to try it 50 to 100 times until I got it. And their whole theory behind it was
repetition.
Right. And their whole theory behind it was the fact that if I get better, therefore they will get better. And then everybody gets better. And that's very important, man. I also love the fact that you have to earn your way with Jiu-Jitsu.
And I think that having to, constantly put in the work to improve.
Yes.
Obviously that carries along into other kinds of working out. It carries along into life in general. But I think it's one of the misconceptions about jiu-jitsu and just fighting and training in general first. And I wish that it applied more to lifting. Like when you come into an MMA gym, you should expect to really suck at first.
Right. For sure.
Like really, really suck.
Yes.
And that's part of the reason why everybody I know that fights, everybody I know that's trained jiu-jitsu for a long time, they're some of the most humble, just like self-aware people that I've ever gotten to interact with.
And you should be willing to continue to learn.
Right.
Like even if you've been lifting for a long time, if someone knows a little bit more than you in the realm of exercise, you should be willing to listen. The same way in jiu-jitsu, you know, the higher belts, it seems like, even, you know, the black belts at our school are always improving and always learning. And I just love that belt system in general, you know? Like, we have like this theory that because we pay some money at certain places that we move right to the top of the food chain. Or the fact that, you know, you should use heavy weight just because you want to, or do, you know, the highest advanced progression of an exercise just because you want to. Mm-hmm. Whereas, like in jiu-jitsu, you're either getting better at the, you know, the drill at hand or the move you're trying to do, or you're not. And the same with weight training. Like if you're doing a step up, and you have instability and you don't have strength and you're not showing control, you shouldn't load the exercise. You don't get to use heavier weight. So you have to be willing to put the time in and be patient enough to go through the progressions to earn your way with, you know, certain exercises and all throughout training.
Yeah, exactly.
What talk to me about like your fight camp. Yeah. Like what was some of the grappling you were doing? Obviously we did some strength and conditioning here. Some Muay Thai that you were doing?
The couple of big things. So I came from a background where I had done like a really heavy striking gym for about a year and then got into jiu-jitsu a lot heavier. My grappling was starting to improve, that kind of thing. But my wrestling sucks. Like real bad.
I didn't know that.
And it's horrible. Yeah. And which is hilarious because my entire family is filled with decorated wrestlers. So I'm basically a disappointment at the end of the day. Yeah.
Your dad wrestled?
Oh yeah, yeah. My grandpa's in the Hall of Fame in Millersville for wrestling too. Yeah, I did not wrestle a day in my life. They tried, it just didn't work out. You know.
You didn't think of looking into wrestling?
No. It didn't work out. Yeah, I was like 6 years old, and I'm like, nah, Dad, I don't want to go to wrestling practice again. And he's like, okay.
Yeah, it changes when you get older.
Yeah. So for me, the fight camp itself was a lot about putting me in those positions that I wasn't comfortable with,
right.
You know? And I think the one thing Jay stressed is, and this goes for like all amateur fighters, I think, it's important to listen to your coach. You know, he was saying, we're not going to do anything new, you know?
Right.
We saw the guy fought was 0-1. We thought he was a wrestler. So we worked a lot of takedown defense, real simple, just sprawls, you know, not immediately falling to my back and going to my guard when I got taken down. And we worked a lot of cage work because I wasn't used to being pressed up against the back of a cage, you know? Right. And I mean, for anybody that like hasn't experienced that before, it's extremely tiring. Like you look at it when you're watching a UFC fight at the bar with your friends or something like that, and it looks like two guys that are just like laying up or like standing up against the side of the cage. But the grinding kind of pressure that goes on in that position is impossible to get used to if you don't do it. My back was basically like covered in bruises for like the entirety of that 2 months.
Just from the cage.
Just from the cage work, yeah. The cage work was definitely one of the biggest parts. But it's important, you know, if you're fighting a guy and you see film and he has this really wide stance or something like that, and you're thinking like, oh, you know, I bet he's really vulnerable to like leg kicks, but you've never thrown a leg kick in your life, you know, or like you're super uncomfortable with it. Don't waste your fight camp learning how to throw leg kicks.
Yeah.
You know, work on the other parts of your game plan. Of course, this kind of stuff does apply to everybody. That's just what we did for me. You know?
What's funny is it actually applies to the way that we went about your strength and conditioning.
Yeah.
You know, I would obviously like to have at least 12 weeks, and that's what I think, you know, fighters should have. But a lot of times you don't get that luxury. And we started like 5 weeks before, so that's not a lot of time at all. So it's
especially with barely lifting at all, kind of like leading into it.
Someone with no strength and conditioning background, like to start doing power cleans and things along those lines, and really high technical movements with a large learning curve. It's going to be tough for you to learn that, and then you're going to probably get injured. So the approach that we took, especially in fight camp, and any athlete out there that's in season, when you're in season, it's very important that you keep the volume low. You know, train 2 to 3 times a week, volume low, meaning 2 to 3 sets, not 4 and 5 and 6 and 7. You know, you're putting so much work on the field or in the ring, you know what I mean, that you're getting so much volume via that.
Yeah.
So doing heavy weights is important, maintaining strength, low reps, heavy weights, low volume, nothing new. But it's basically, you know, the idea behind the in-season training is overuse prevention and preventing injury. and training the opposites of what you're doing, really. Because if you think about like all the boxing you were doing,
and that's
all
the forward movement,
and the grappling, it's all like flexion. So especially for our core, that's why we were doing a lot of those planks and carrying things in one hand to preventing rotation and things along those lines. And then it's a good time to, implement all your recovery strategies. Deep breathing and foam rolling. You know what I mean? And trigger point therapy and drinking water and getting good sleep. So in the gym, a basic workout for if you're in season, pick 4 things. A lot of exercises are not your friend. Maybe a single leg squat, a dumbbell row, a deadlift, and a single arm bench press for 2 or 3 rounds of anywhere from 5 to 8 reps, keeping yourself strong. Get in, do some mobility, activate your hips with some bands and your rotator cuff with your bands. Get up those lagging muscles and those dormant muscles. Talk about your nutrition. Are you eating enough? Are you not eating enough? And are you recovering? Did you feel like any physical overtraining symptoms?
Well, yeah. I mean, it was physical, yes, but primarily for me, I think it was mental, because one of the things that Jay said to me really, really early on in the camp was that it was my job as the fighter to recover.
Yeah.
I came in, I responded to everything the coaches were telling me to do or that you were telling me to do when we were doing strength and conditioning stuff. And then the moment I left that situation, I wasn't supposed to go and, do a whole bunch of extra running or do a whole bunch of extra like sparring on the side, with somebody or something like that. My job was to go home and eat and sleep and stretch. And that was it. It was recovery, And
a lot of times I try to apply that with my own clients. But when you get, you kind of get into your own head and where you're thinking like more is better and, get after it. And that kind of thing in your head, starts talking to you. It's very important that you understand that tough is not better. Better training is better. You know what I mean? Better is better. And the training should make you better, not worse. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it shouldn't lead to injury. So the more thing all the time and, not being disciplined enough to not be a stimulus junkie where you're like, no, I didn't do enough today. Where you need to be so sore that you can't walk the next day and you got to be puking or it's not a good workout. Like that is such a short-term thought process. Your training should give you long-term results, and if you're constantly feeling aches and pains and you're getting sick and you're getting reactive at work and feeling depressed and you can't sleep at night, and if something hurts, don't do that exercise, train and apply the effective minimal dose. There was a really smart trainer who said that, and I forget who it was exactly, but that is very important, man, because it's about, your training program and not the day at hand. Don't worry about running yourself into the ground. Worry about those long-term results and getting better over time.
It's like for me, I mean, during my camp, and I think MMA fighters are especially vulnerable to that kind of like tough guy mentality, because the thought that you have, and the thought that I had going through it, and this is where that mental overtraining thing kind of kicks in, is that if I was at home and I wasn't, watching videos about MMA or, doing some kind of like, stretching or a bodyweight exercise or that, the thought going through my mind is, well, the guy that I'm fighting is probably doing something to better himself right now, So, can I afford to rest?
Right.
And I think that that's a dangerous kind of mentality to fall into. But, I remember one specific night, and this goes into this kind of like tough guy pushing through kind of thing, and also how important it is to have good coaches. There was one specific night where we were doing just a hard sparring night. It was one of the very few. I only had a couple hard sparring nights over the course of my camp, and I think it's really important to not overemphasize hard sparring, especially for amateur MMA. If you can take a punch, you can take a punch. You don't need to keep testing that time and time again during the camp. So we were doing a Shark Tank style thing, so I would get a new guy every single round, and I had to stay in. And we had gone through a couple rounds of this, and a lot of the guys that I was going with were bigger than me and that kind of thing. And I just kept taking jabs to like my left eye, just time and time again. I just kept falling for the exact same thing. My hand was low. And then eventually I get hit, and I knew that spot was sore, and we're down on the ground. And I swept the guy, and I come up on top. And I'm striking, and then I hear Jay on the side, and he's like, no, stop. It's like halfway through the round, so I get up, and he's like, come over here. And he like kind of looks at my eye, and he's like, okay, we're done, no more. And I go look in the mirror, and like my eye is ridiculously swollen,
right.
you know?
But you see this all the time, and especially with strength and conditioning too.
Yeah.
Like, people have hamstring injuries, and they still want to, like, deadlift that day, or their back's going, they still want to deadlift.
Yeah.
Like, first off, opt out. Like, there's better options that you could do that day.
Yeah.
You know? Like, if your low back's killing you, maybe try a hip thruster. That also works your glute and your hamstrings, just like a deadlift does.
The issue was there. It's like, you know, if I had kept going in that situation, you know, to continue that kind of analogy, if I had kept lifting after my like back was already hurting, if I had taken one or two more punches and that split,
you wouldn't even
then
have fought.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, it was close to the fight. Like, there's a pretty good chance that I would not have been able to get that to heal in time.
No doubt.
You know?
And I think that one of the best things that I've heard is from Joel Jamison, who trains Mighty Mouse, and he talks about from 8 weeks out, and he does Mighty Mouse's conditioning. And so he does a high day, low day. And basically, you know, there's one day where your central nervous system demanding, you're pushing really hard, you might be lifting weights, you might be doing your sparring sessions, things along those lines. And then the next day, you're doing active recovery, you know, like a bike ride or a long hike or mobility, you know, doing 10 minutes of, you know, foam rolling and then 10 minutes of active mobility stuff. You know, but also, like you said, man, listening to your body is very important. If you wake up a 3 out of 10 and you push it that day, how silly is that? You know, you're only doing something that's detrimental. And good luck trying to, you know, be consistent throughout the week and be able to be motivated in the gym.
Yeah.
You know? So, and you know what else I think is pretty important too, and I want to give this analogy, but the water bottle analogy. Like, the proper amount of stimulus for your body, right? Or I'm not trying to say don't train hard. Train hard, but train smart.
Right.
You know, like if we were to fill up the water bottle, if the water bottle's filled up to the top, perfect amount of water. You overfill it, and it's spilling everywhere, and now you got all types of problems. You know what I mean? And stress comes from volume. You know, if you're someone who's constantly going hard, you know, and I've said this before, but it's like the New Year's analogy. I don't think people are lazy after New Year's and they quit. I think they go too hard, too much, too soon. You know, and you have jobs and you have kids and you have families and all these other stressors. It's too much. What is your message to other amateur fighters or video gamers all over the world, Clint?
I mean, I would say, I think it's so important to not, you know, hesitate anymore with getting into training. You know, so many of the people that like messaged me after I posted, you know, the fight picture to Reddit and that kind of thing, were talking about, oh, you know, I'm thinking about starting at an MMA gym. Like, what did you do to like get yourself ready and that kind of thing? And I didn't do anything. You know, I didn't do anything. I signed up and I went to practice. And it's the same way for, you know, 5Ks, for, you know, any kind of like, whatever you want to do. Like, it's very important to just sign up and do it.
Yeah.
You know, it's to not put too much pressure on yourself, to not set unrealistic expectations for yourself, but to give yourself a goal.
Right.
You know, you want to give yourself a reason to train, but you don't, like we talked about so much, want to push it too hard.
Yeah.
You know, I even, despite having a full-time job, despite having an employee of mine change jobs midway through, so it added even more work to my plate. You know, having a girlfriend, maintaining an apartment, all this other stuff. Yeah. You know, I managed to work through all that and do an amateur fight.
Right.
You know, I see people all the time. You're a great example of this too, and it makes me so happy. You know, you came in, started jiu-jitsu, and then it was like 2 months later, whatever, you signed up for your first tournament.
Yeah.
You know, I think that
I was
attitude,
shitting my pants.
Yeah.
I had no idea you weren't nervous. I was at this thing like, should we go? Should I do it? Should I not do it? What do you think? Should I really do this?
But you just gotta get out there and do it.
Yeah, 100%.
You know? That's the
and it can be
biggest thing.
small goals and small increments, but the bottom line is that it makes you a better person. And it makes, like we talked about in the beginning, it makes everybody around you better. You know, and there is this trickle-down effect and this momentum that you gauge and that you get to keep applying it to all types of aspects of your life. And it is very important, and it's very powerful. And it could be, an amateur MMA fight, or just even signing up at a gym for the first time in your life and going twice a week, But these little things, these little momentum shifters, these things that you can latch onto and go for a ride with, they will change your life. They will change who you are. They will change the definition of the person that you are and who you're becoming, and they will make you wake up in the morning. And that is very important, And along the way, almost inevitably, you will meet people that will change your life and that you will really get along with, and that will also impact you, So that's why your story, like I said, your story is a big one. Your story is very important for me to tell other people, because it defines the fact that, it does not matter who you are, but if you apply hard work, you can do some cool shit,
Yeah.
Dude, thank you so much for doing this, brother.
Thank you,
appreciate
Derek.
it, man.
Yes.